Alrighty, here we are. We're going to be putting spark plugs and wires in this Mercury Sable. 4 Taurus the same. And this is the 3-liter Duratec, the dual overhead cam V6. And the big challenge is not the front spark plugs, they're sort of right there in your face, but it's the rear 3 or underneath the upper intake plenum. We're going to start by removing the negative battery cable. And after we do this, we're going to remove the positive cable, because actually, to make life easy and accessibility, we're going to be removing the whole battery to make room for the project. Yeah, it's always a good idea to remove the negative cable before the positive, because then if you do get it with the wrench against something metal with the negative unhooked, no sparks are going to go flying. And we're just going to simply, which most of these are long since, go and pull this factory cover off the battery, which is surprising it's still even there and hasn't been long since gone. And down here's the battery hold down, 5/16 bolt or an 8mm will usually work. I'm using an extension and a ratchet, and it's turning out. A lot of times these will snap off with no real effort. They're not that big, but this surprisingly is turning out. This is actually my cousin's husband's car, and he had to put a battery in, and he only bought it a few months ago, so apparently that's why it came, and he was lucky and got it out without breaking it. And there is the little block hold down plus the bolt. Okay, now we're going to just take and sit this out of our way, and we're going to get the battery out of here. And sort of get our cables out of the way, give it a little tilt, get hands underneath of it, and out it comes. And that just makes a good bit of room to work. Alrighty, next we're going to get the air cleaner assembly out of our way. Just take and release these clips, just sort of a little pry, and then push back on the housing, pull up, there's tabs, and then we're going to take, unhook the breather hose that comes from the valve cover over to the air duct assembly out of it, and get this here pulled out the whole way, and we'll unhook the one that comes from the rear valve cover to the duct. The second one's not going as easy as the first one, but we got in. Believe it or not, there's still one more hose that goes into this from somewhere. Oh, just over at that vacuum splitter on the firewall, and got that. Now we're going to take and unplug our mass airflow sensor, push in on the clip, and pull down, hopefully. Maybe. It's being a little stubborn, but lo and behold, there it is. Okay, now we're going to take the 5/16 socket and turn the clamp loose that holds the air duct to the throttle body, and we'll be able to soon get this whole upper part of the air cleaner, the mass airflow sensor, and this duct out of her way, and out she comes. And there it is. Lay this out of the way, and this is a good step towards progressing on this, get more room to work. And this simply just pushes up 2 little push-in clips in at this over the throttle cable. Alrighty, now it's time to remove the throttle cables. There's 2 on it, one's for the accelerator and the other's for the cruise. First push forward, and then just that one, just push it ahead. That's the one for the cruise. And then we're going to take and get this throttle return spring out of our way. Should have did that first. That's simple enough. You can see me removing that. And then this one, the one for the throttle cable, it like loops up around the groove in the pulley. And then pull it out, and that's undone. And there is 2 bolts here. We're going to just take and remove these. They're 8mm. Get those out, and we're just going to be laying this whole part out of our way to have room to work. You don't need to take the cables out of the bracket. That's not a necessary step. Furthermore, besides room to work, this needs removed to lift the upper intake plenum off. It needs removed from it. And again, I think it's just as easy to do it this way instead of... You could, if you wanted to try to get the cables out of that bracket, you could, but there'd be a chance that plastic break. And this seems like a simpler answer. And this last one's out. And we're going to take and lay this, as we said, out of the way. Now we can progress here, unplug this wire from the idle air control valve. And there, just take and lay our plug-in out of the way. And I'm going to unhook the vacuum hose to the EGR valve. It's a nice simple step. And we're going to unplug our wire from the throttle position sensor on the throttle body. No problem on that. So far so good. Sometimes those clips can be a problem. Again, get this subbed out of her way to just not messing with us. Then unplug the wire from the EGR solenoid and vacuum hoses. 2 vacuum hoses, but it's just molded into one plug-in, so it's only one item to be unhooked. And there, you can get a close-up look of that vacuum hose plug-in. And we're going to take and remove the EGR valve itself. 10 millimeter deep socket here on these bottom ones because of the stud sticking up. And turn, and I need to turn a little bit more. Surprisingly, they're coming with no problem whatsoever. There we go, and they're just finger tight now. Spin it the rest of the way off. And the 2 on the bottom of this goes into a flexible pipe that goes down to the catalytic converter. In addition, the 2 on the top go into the manifold. This is, like I say, where it makes the connection to complete the mission on the Carford EGR system. There's the other nut off. Now we're going to remove the bolts. If I said bolts on the other ones, I meant to say nuts and vice versa. But anyhow, the bottom 2 are nuts and the top 2 here are bolts, and they're turning right out. And again, as usual, counterclockwise to loosen. Pretty much common knowledge in most cases. There's a few exceptions on the counterclockwise to loosen, but this isn't anything on this we're going to be doing. Yeah, this actually makes the 3rd time I've did spark plugs in one of these 3-liter dual overhead cam V6 Tauruses. This is actually a Sable, but same thing. But yeah, I had one wagon, a Taurus, I did, and my mother had one a couple years ago. I did the plugs and the wires, and now this one. Yeah, my cousin, I usually don't do his work on the cars for her husband, but the guy usually goes to didn't even want to mess with it, his actual garage. I'm like, it's not really that bad, and it's not. Just be patient and carefully disassemble, and there's a EGR valve off. Now we're looking down in behind, and we're going to unhook this vacuum hose that goes down underneath the intake plenum. Somebody I see, because oil had apparently got it fattened up, it wasn't fitting good, put a wear tie around it. It's being a little stubborn. There's not a lot of room to get your hand. This might be one of the trickier things, but there it is on the whole thing to access, unplugging. And now, to save yourself a lot of sanity, this goes way down underneath where we were working. This is for the brake booster to vacuum. But simply, and you can just let it hook to the intake plenum, unhook it back here on the firewall, remove your clip. A little bit of encouragement, it needs pride. And again, you can easily access it here, but if you try unplugging it where it goes on that intake plenum down underneath, yeah, it'll make you pull your hair out, but you don't have to do that. Again, little trick here, make life easy on it. And without a doubt, here is the hardest vacuum hose to unhook, and this there is no out. Comes straight up underneath the throttle body. Here's a look looking up down at it. I've had to work back and forth, jiggle, private screwdriver, and it eventually, we're going to get it here. I'm trying to show you again the all angles, but this is literally the hardest part of it. And finally, I think I got it loosened up. I can just reach in from the front, and it is unplugged. Yeah, it's actually only a short piece of vacuum hose, and then it goes into a metal line. Alrighty, proceeding along here. Now we're going to take and unhook this oil breather tube. This sits down like underneath the intake plenum and the manifold. It unplugs real easy, but it is sort of hidden, and it just pulls straight back out. You can't really see where it plugs into, but there we got it slid out. Again, it comes out easy, and then we're just going to take it out of the other end of the where it goes up to the intake plenum, slide it out, and get that out of the way, and that's another step closer. Okay, now it's time that we're going to take and get the bolts here in the plenum itself, showing you the location of all of them. Okay, in total there is 8 of these, and they're an 8mm head on each one of them. Not anything that will be tight, because they just go down into the plastic just like in a brush thread. Okay, and as far as turning them out, one extension, like probably the 6-inch long ones, all you're going to need. And just like I say, you see how easy they're breaking loose. I'm going to turn them all free before I take them the whole way out. There's another one done. This is working in backwards order to tightening sequence, which I don't think it's really that technical on this, but better safe than sorry. It's not a big thing to follow, and just keep working back and forth. Yeah, it's not really a big deal doing this, but yet it is amazing to have to remove something like this to access spark plugs. But as you will see later in the video, once it's out of your way, they are actually easy to get to. It's just a matter of making getting everything out of the way to access the back plugs. Alrighty, we're down to 2 more here to loosen, and then we'll take them the rest of the way out. Furthermore, on the good news, on a modern car electronic ignition, you don't have to do this that often. This car has, I believe, it's around 140-some thousand miles on it, and we'll see. Probably the first time it's been done, but then again, maybe it has been already done. Now, I do see a wire tie on the spark plug wires. And now to take them the rest of the way out to save time, I'm using this T-handle driver that spins around to loosen them the rest of the way up. Now that's one thing I've noticed, even once they're completely loose on them. Some of them pull right out and some of them are sort of stubborn and don't want to come out. Now that one came out pretty easy, but others of them, they're not as easy to get out, like that one's being stubborn. And I sort of almost threw it across the garage. There's another one done. And there's ones down in, you can't really access them. The biggest thing, I just want to be sure when I lift this off that they're not laying loose, that they would fall in the intake or anything. That wouldn't be good. This is the day not to make any big mistakes. Okay, there's another one, came free. As you see, some of them come out easier than others. That rubber grommet that sits around the bolt. Yeah, the reason doing this on this car, it's not bad, but the cousin asked when she said her husband's car was messing up. It has a little bit of a hesitation, and I did drive it. It's not bad, but just a little bit like when it's cold, it wants to cut out. So that's why we're doing this project. But I am convinced, I said earlier about that it might have been done. Somebody has at least put wires on it, because they're definitely not the factory plug wires. They're an aftermarket brand. And the reason I say that, they don't have the spark plug numbers on them. The originals have the numbers on the wire for what coinciding cylinder it goes to. Alrighty, here we're getting another one turned out, and well, soon you can see it's already starting to, looks like, lift up some. It's getting ready to go, and there's another bolt and grommet out. Yeah, watch the grommets and the bolts. Be sure they come along with them and don't stay. On this one, they all stayed with the bolt, no problem. And there it is. And there's the back side of it. That's been the work to get that off. And now we're down to the spark plugs and wires. Alrighty, now we're going to remove the first plugs. Just sort of work it back and forth. And there, pulled up out. This is cylinder number 6. It's not really irrelevant. We're going to do one plug and wire at a time, not to mess up. And stick with our about 6-inch long socket, 3/8 drive, and these are, it's coming. Like I say, they are an aluminum head, so try to be careful, but it's coming out. It was a little bit nerve-wracking there for a second. You saw the amount of torque required to take it. Now it's so far out, just take and turn it out, and be sure you have a good spark plug socket on this with the rubber grommet that it holds. And there's our first plug out. And here we're going to look at the label on it, what the gap is to be. And it shows between 52 to 56 thousand. Usually these platinum type plugs are pretty close, but I'm still going to check it just to be sure, see once what it does check at. And there we're going around, and there, try to zoom in on the spark plug filler gauge if you can see it. And I do believe that one looks like around 56 thousandths, the upper end of the limit. So we're just going to put that one in, right back in, and tighten it back up. Alrighty, and we're going to tighten it up there. I'm not worried about a torque wrench. The book says 7 to 15 foot-pounds, which is a pretty broad range. Just once you get it past the snug, just a little bit extra and without going crazy, and I'd say that's good. And then try to ratchet off. And now comes this is the downside of the good fitting grommet in the spark plug socket. I don't want to let go of the spark plug, but we got it and the grommet came with it. And we're going to take our first plug wire, and we're going to cut this wire tie that I noticed earlier. At least somebody broke the spark plug wire clip, so, and yeah, it has spark plug wires once upon a time. And there it goes back around. Alrighty, and now we got another spark plug wire loom here to disconnect, hopefully without doing like someone did before on the other and breaking it. Little fine screwdriver, and you just pry in the top of it, and it should be coming free. And there it is, and then you can just take it and show you close up what you want to do. This latch sits right in again when it closes, right in there, and then when you release it, you just take the screwdriver and pry right there at the top on that tab, and that should keep from breaking it about 9 times out of 10 at least. Oh yeah, before we completely remove the plug wire, here's this vacuum hose that's just laying that went to that EGR transducer in the EGR itself. I mean the intake plenum. And yeah, the EGR, I said the right thing. I'm going to just lay that out of the way, and that can actually stay off till we put the intake plenum back on. I actually meant to take it out when I did it at the time. I even forgot it was laying there. Now we can reach back around. And the spark plug for number 6 is the one clear over to the left side of the car at the back of the coil pack. And there comes our plug wire. Okay, now we're going to take and get our spark plug wires out, our new ones, and lay them out. I like to get them all out and organized before proceeding by length, from the shortest to the longest. And they're always in there just sort of rolled together in a ball. And there's definitely a longer plug wire. Again, an area to work. And just like I say, where you can lay them out until you match up sizes. Like I say, it saves time down the road. Alrighty, finally have them here from the longest to the shortest, or shortest to the longest, however you want to look at it. There is a variation slightly in each one, but yeah, there they are. And now we're going to go take, this is going to be the longest one out of the bunch for the cylinder number 6. I'm just matching them up, showing you it matches the length. Then we're going to take this protective plastic cover off the original wire and put it on the other one, the new one. And if you look, this plastic insulation split, and once you start it through, it slides off easy. Now it's a little bit, you'll see here, a little bit more of a challenge getting it started on the other plug wire, but you just sort of take and spread one end. And I'm getting it up here close, show you spread it, start it on, and you sort of pull back down to keep the gap lined up until it starts on. And if all goes well, once you get about an inch or so on, it goes pretty easy. And yeah, this one isn't doing bad. And a lot of times, although this is in good shape, you can buy this stuff at a parts store, but it seems like this is going to be reusable. If it gets too old, you got to do this, it just breaks up in little pieces. Or the next lazy thing I think people do, don't reuse it. But on this cars, these modern cars, and sitting under that intake plenum, I think it's a good idea with the heat. And then we're going to put a little dielectric grease to come with the spark plug wires at the end of the boot. So when you go to remove it, supposedly it'll remove easier and all that good stuff, which I'm not planning on removing them, but there it sits down in. You can feel it snap into place. And we're going to fish it back around and put it back on the coil pack, and the tower in the middle. I said earlier about removing it from the one over on the left side. I don't know what I was thinking, but it's the one in the middle. Again, if you're doing one at a time, you'll keep this in order and you're not going to mix up any plug wires, and all will be nice and safe on that. And to finish out what I'm saying, that goes in the middle. There you can see the shiny rubber boot. Here's a close-up. And now we're going to do the next one in the front, which is cylinder number 5. It's basically, the front is going from the driver's side to the passenger is 654, and the rear is 321. And back in with our socket and extension again. Or perhaps a more logical way to look at the spark plug cylinder locations, if it be like in days of all rear-wheel drive cars in the front of the engine, the ones on the right side would be cylinders 1, 2, 3, and the ones on the left would be 4, 5, 6, but just another way of looking at it. And here we got another spark plug out, and we'll take here and we're going to check the gap again like we did on the other one. Alrighty, this one here looks like it'd be about 5,800s. I mean thousands. I don't know, it's maybe being a little picky, but you can take, if you have one that's too wide, doing what I'm doing, take and push down with some pressure against it and bring it back in, and then just gap it to the proper gap. Like I say, that was maybe nitpicky, and I think this is the only one that was even an issue on. And now time to put it back in the cylinder and tighten it up. As you can see, once you're actually doing it there on the car with that intake plenum off, they're real easy to access as long as you have the extension, and they're straight down in. But like I say, it's just the work of getting to it, and then we're tightening it up, and there we got two plugs in, and we're going to do our wire, and we're going to work our extension off. This one's coming. Again, a lot of times they do want the socket sticks on, but it came. Alrighty, tracing our wire back here, and this one is the one that's clear over on the left side or driver's side of the car, the spark plug on the coil pack, and we got that out. And even with the plug wires, just like the plugs with that intake, they're not hard to get to. On these, the one we did, the first one was the longest. This one's the in-between of the long plug wires, and then the shortest long one, if that makes any sense, is going to be the third one coming up. And here we're taking our insulation back off. Off's definitely pretty much the easy part of it, and then it just peels right back, just like peeling a banana. Of course, I don't eat bananas, haha. Alrighty, same deal as before. I'm putting it on just sort of try to work it there that you get the gap on it and start twisting it on. I mean, like I say, keep the gap spread in the insulation, it'll go on. And it's going. Like I say, it's surprisingly old car. These are good shape. It's not breaking up, not whatsoever. And it's even, I do have it in the garage, but it's a cool day here. I'm working on it, only in the 30s out. But yeah, but I do have the heat on in the garage. It's probably about 60 in the shop. And there it is. And we're going to put our dielectric grease on it before we stick it down on the spark plug. Yeah, personally, I'm not really that big of a fan of that dielectric grease. I once upon a time, about 10 years ago, worked at Advanced Auto Parts, and that was, they sold little packs of it up at the registers, and that was something, if you were a super salesman, you got that a boy if you could sell packs of it. I never sold any real packs of it, but that's irrelevant. Now, here we're going to take and put the wire back on. Like I say, sort of just follow the pattern here. That insulation, again, that sits where it would rub against the upper intake when it's back on the car. And we're back around to our coil pack, and we're just going to push the plug wire back on the coil pack. And like I say, you can tell, again, feel it snap into place, and there is another one taken care of. Alrighty, now we're down to working on the number 3 out of 6. We're almost halfway done with this, and it's, again, actually doing the plugs and the wires takes less time in accessing them. And here we're going to take and back down in with our socket and extension, just same old, same old. And this one here is pretty tight. You can see that it's taking a good bit of torque, but it does come. I would not want to even think of snapping one off. I've never done in any car any time, but it's something just as soon never have it happen. Alrighty, here we're going to pull our socket back up out again, and then there's our plug, and we're another one here. We'll get another plug ready. We'll check the gap here like we've been doing on every one. And this one, like I said, I think it's only was that one. And there she is, and we'll stick it back down in the cylinder. Due to the tightness of some of the spark plugs, I would not recommend using any longer extension than what I'm using, because you get better torque and a better feel of what you're doing with the closer you are to whatever you're turning. And again, you could use a longer one, but that's sort of, I don't personally recommend it, just my 2 cents. And there's another one tightened in, and we'll see here we got our socket and extension pulled back out, and this time the socket did stay on, so we'll put the the extension back on the socket and wiggle and jiggle around, and hopefully here, and we fished it out. Alrighty, time to track the wire down where it goes to, and this one is the one clear over on the passenger side and the rear of the coil pack. On that, the front cylinders all go to the rear of the coil pack. And then we learned that, and they're back to the insulation off again, and there it comes. Yeah, I'm going to include timestamps in this video. If you don't want to watch the whole thing, if a particular part interests you, you can go to it in the description and look at the timestamps. Again, this is sort of monotonous, maybe showing every one of these plugs and wires, but on the other hand, I sooner would show more information as needed and not enough. I know, on the other hand, if I'm trying to learn something, I don't like a video that's real vague that doesn't really answer your question, so I try to be as thorough as I reasonably can. And here, back down to the grease again, just as with the other ones. Put the little dab on it. And then, but of course, we're going to take here and stick it back on the spark plug. It was ready to go. And route it back around, head down in, same deal. And again, you'll feel when these do click in. I know I've said that before. There, and then just pull back when you do put them on. You can make sure it is on good. And then I'm going to put it in the spark plug wire loom and wrap it back around our insulation. Put it beside where the other one sat. And back to the coil pack, and on the last tower on the coil pack in the rear, and we'll just snap this down in, and that concludes our 3 front spark plugs and wires. And we're going to start on the ones at the rear of the engine next. Now, since I started on the driver's side on the front ones, I might as well do it on the rear ones. You can work any order you want. I'm going to take, this is actually cylinder number 3, then back in with our extension, and this is still plenty of room, but it's slightly back under the firewall of the rear of the engine. It's not as roomy as the front access with that intake Plenum, but there's still, it's not a big deal. And sort of they're crowding you with the coil pack itself on it. But again, it works. It's nothing. I've done spark plugs in Ford Aerostars years ago. That's a whole nother story. And Chevy Astros. And there's spark plug out. Alright, in here we're checking our gap again. Try here to get it focused in. It's not the easiest, but if you look here, and I got it there, it's like 56 thousandths of an inch, which is the upper, what the specifications are in the car. And we're back down in with the socket and extension, and this definitely, these back ones, like I say, you'll need the socket that does hold the plug good, or you'll drop it and it'll end up back under behind that engine and next to impossible to access. And just tighten it up, and that's the first one in the rear spark plug in. And pull our socket, and socket stuck on this one, go figure. One of the, oh, that was not that bad, harder ones to get to. It had to stay, and there it is, it came. We've saved the day. Okay, here's another spark plug wire loom, and this just releases like I showed earlier with the little screwdriver. Just pry up on that upper tab, spread it apart nicely, and take it, and we'll just pull it off the spark plugs. This one, like I say, we'll put it in when we're all done to keep them nice and tidy. Again, the more of these looms and like that insulation, the nicer and more neatly you put it into place, the longer the wires will last. It'll keep them out of the heat and away from stuff they shouldn't get against. Now there, if you probably start on the outer, and I'm fishing it down underneath the outer plug wires, maybe you wouldn't have to do that, but I don't find it that hard, and I just keep going how I'm doing it, and there it's off the coil pack and our insulation, which isn't as long as the outer plugs. This is a fairly short piece. We'll pry it back off of it. And once it's off, we'll be putting it here back on the new spark plug wire. And same deal, just start it on. In some respects, these shorter pieces of this insulation are fight with you more than the longer ones, but as say, it's wanting to wrap up when I was putting it on, and they're still fighting a little, but it's going. But yeah, I think the little short pieces of that are more troublesome. But nevertheless, it's on, and we're going to do our little dab of dielectric grease, which is about all. They certainly on this, if being important, they don't want to give you any too much extra of it, and just same deal. Push it down, work it back under the other spark plug wires, and we'll push it down into place once we get it routed. The big thing with any automobile work or anything is keep calm and think it over, and it'll work. And there it is, finally this is one fight going on too. It's in. It's snapped into place. And now we're going to take and get the back on the coil pack on the coil tower, and it's the one again clear over on the right side of the car. Alrighty, 4 done, and we're getting on to number 5. Are we having fun yet? This is fun. Okay, and work it back and forth. Sometimes they will be hard to pull off, and this seems like one is going to be a little contrary, but out it comes. And there, get the spark plug out next. Yes, luckily I didn't have any on this car. In the past I've had those spark plug wires that are hard to come off, that they'll pull off the boot, but the metal clip at the end of them will stick on the spark plug, and that can be a pain, especially like a deal on this where they sit down in, but luckily none did. And there's another plug out, and as usual just checking our gap, make sure on it. And the other one is basically right on. It's maybe 55 thousandths instead of 56, but we'll just take and widen it out a little bit and get it evened out, and back in with the plug. And as always with all of my videos, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to post it in the comments below, and we'll be sure to get back with you with an answer and help you out any way possible. On that note, now we're just going to take and simply get this one tightened back up, working it in there and back on with the ratchet and tighten it right into place. Again, as I've said before, not crazy tight, but tight enough that it's not going to vibrate loose, which isn't real likely on a long reach spark plug like on this car. And there's our plug wire. Get that off. It's the one right in the middle of the coil pack in the front. And most obviously, out of your whole set of spark plug wires, the shortest spark plug wire in the set you have will be this wire, the one that goes in cylinder number 2, that middle one in the back. And here we're switching our insulation around, as we have with the other 4 plug wires up to this point. And this one, I think, is making me look like a fool. Well, it don't necessarily take the spark plug insulation to do that. Anyways, we're after this one. There's only one more to go, and be time to put all of this back together into one happy motoring machine, and hopefully it'll run just fine. It didn't really run bad before, like I say, I run it, but there was a little bit of hesitation in it, as the cousin's husband was complaining about. And we're pushing it back down on the tower on the coil, just as before. And here we come with our dielectric grease, which is all but all, and we got a dab out of it. Alrighty, now we're down to the point of just simply pushing it back down on the spark plug like the other times before throughout the project. And then we'll be down to the last one, the grand finale, and all that good stuff. Yes, actually, in the order I did them, I started on cylinder number 6, and we're going to end on cylinder number 1. We just did the countdown, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here is number 1. We're pulling the spark plug boot off of it right now to finish this up. Okay, here it is. We're prying it up, and there's free. And just slide that up out of there. And I think you know what comes next. Here we are with our socket and ratchet, and we're just going to turn this out and get the old spark plug out so we can put the new one in. Same old, same old. Oh, and I don't think I mentioned this earlier, and I'll put it in at the earlier part when I start removing the plugs in the text there, but the spark plug socket on this is the 5/8 socket, not the 13/16. And like I say, you probably picked up on that watching the video by now, and I'll be sure to add that, but I do not believe I mentioned it. And there's her last spark plug out. She dripped with oil, but I think the valve cover leaks a little bit and was laying down in it. And here we're going to check our spark plug gap again. Alrighty, here we're checking it, and it's showing about 55 thousandths of an inch, 56, pretty much what they all were, except that one was, for whatever reason, was like up around 60,000, but that was the only exception in the whole bunch. And here we are again, socket back in, socket and extension and ratchet and tighten it up, and we'll be getting the plug wire on here shortly, and we'll be all finished up. And that's one thing there. You maybe make a comment if you want in the section. I thought about splitting this up into 3 parts. This video, one on the intake plenum removal, one on strictly the spark plug and wires, and one on the reassembly. Or do you prefer, which is what I prefer, one big long video with timestamps? It's something, again, feel free to let your feelings known. Alrighty, now we're down to get our last spark plug wire off. As the final time on this, and there's only one plug wire left, so that narrows the choices down which one to pick from if you've been following along and going with the steps, and our good old installation, getting it worked around. Now back on the subject of the videos, either one big long one on something like this or split up. Now none of them on a long one like this, you could actually work start to finish, follow along, pause the video if you're working on your own vehicle. Just a thought in my mind. Okay, there we got that on, and it's time to put our last of the dielectric, if I can squeeze any more out, and golly, we got one more drop out of it, and back down in on the spark plug with the boot. Snap that bad boy down in place. Alrighty, and after that's in here, we're just going to take here and nicely wrap it around how it was. It's like made a loop back around the coil pack, and put it back on the coil pack on the tower, and there it is. The final one is done, and we're going to put the spark plug wire loom back here, coil pack back on, which that's simple enough. Put your plug wires into it, push them down in those grooves for them, each one, and then once they're all nice and in place, this keeps them all. When you do this, try not to twist the plug wires together. That's the purpose, so they don't get all tangled up, and there it is. And then it sort of keeps it nice and out of the way, so when we go put the manifold back on the plenum and put our other one on at the other location, the wire loom on the spark plug wires, and same deal, put them in. Here you can get a better view of it, and once they're all snapped in, and just lock it shut, and that concludes that. Now here's just an overview of the lower intake manifold before we put the upper plenum on. Make sure there's no thin there that's in the way. Make sure I wiped those off. Yes, I'm going to reuse the gasket. I have done this before with no problem, as long as your gasket isn't obviously tore. And here's the underneath of the intake plenum. The O-rings are all in place, nice shape. And just like I say, let you take a good look at it. Yeah, unless they're broke or something, I've reused them before. You don't need to get new gaskets on this upper intake plenum. Alrighty, now enough talk. It's time to put it back in place. We'll take it and carefully work it around the spark plug wires, make sure nothing's in the way. There's no locating pins on it, which would make life easy, but we'll get it about where it should sit and hold it in place, and get one of our bolts here. Make sure you have one that's accessible. Don't forget that rubber grommet around the bolt. And one of the ones in the front's easiest to start in, and get it a few threads that it's holding, and you can have freedom of both hands again. Now I want to take and put one of the ones that sit down in for the rear ones and get it started in. They're sort of like diagonal apart. An alternative to what I did, but I have it close enough. You could take the socket. I've used this trick in other videos. Took some grease at the end of the socket or Vaseline and put the bolt in it to hold it in place to start it, but it worked. And now we got our driver handle, and we're starting it in. Right now, just barely put them in, just like finger tight, and we'll be torquing them eventually to the specs later here in a few minutes. And there we got another one in the front, and there's 3 of them in. Furthermore, it's not a necessity, but this is a handy little tool I'm using to start these in. This with this T-handle. It's easy, and you can, like I say, quickly get them started in. But whatever works for you. Now put another one here in the back of the manifold. take long fingers and work it down in, or as I've made the comment earlier, you can do the alternative approach with the socket and Vaseline or grease, whatever works for you and you have available. You could probably even take like a pair of needle nose, long pair, and start it down in's another choice. Just mainly try not to drop the bolt that you end up pulling the manifold back off to get it, and I didn't, and that's the main thing. However, if you drop one, that's something I didn't need to use on this project. You have an assortment of magnets on like a long handle do come in handy. I have one that's on a long spring that I fished many bolts out, but again, I didn't actually need it on this. And we got the one in the left front started in, and there's going to be another 3 we have to put in yet till we can move on to the torque sequence. Okay, we got this one in, and let's take and move around here, and we're going to put the one here at the back of the front, sits down at the corner, and this one is right there between where the EGR sits and the manifold on the outside. It's actually fairly easy to get to. This is, like I say, makes number 6 now. And tighten we go. Again, just finger tight, and here we're back over on the passenger side of the car, and we only have 2 more to go. These 2 outer ones here are easy to get to, and like I say, right there between the manifold and the spark plug wires on the outside, and get us in here, and we'll get our handy dandy tool here in a second. And I'm even going to just start the other one right now so I can just tighten the last 2 up without stopping and putting the bolt in between. Now if you followed along this far, we're well over halfway through, and some of the worst of it's behind, except for hooking a few of these hoses up coming up shortly. So you did the trip there with no problem, and get this tightened up, and like I say, we'll here in a very short time we'll give these the final torque, and they do not get tight at all. There's our torque wrench, and these get, I don't know if you can see it or not, this is an inch-pound torque wrench. I'll put a link in the description. I bought it at Harbor Freight, but they're 89 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds. If you do foot-pounds, you're going to snap the bolts, break stuff, but 89 inch-pounds. And get it, like I said, I don't know if I got it focused, you can read it or not, but this is a little clicking style torque wrench, and it's priced right. Alright, the first one to torque is the second one in from the passenger side in the rear is the first one that gets it. And I'm going to actually take here and just tighten it here a little bit, but I'm still not going to go the whole way to a click, so I'm going to come back around on it. And then number 2 is the second one in the front from the driver's or left side of the car. And then we're going to move around here in a second after we got that. Like I said, I'm not on the click yet. And we're going to take number 3 is the second one in from the driver's or the left side of the car. And it's the one that sits down in there. What you're basically doing is working back and forth in a crisscross pattern, and it evenly tightens it. Now we're on the number 4 is the second one in from the passenger or the right side of the car. Now we get to move the whole way over here to this one in the back corner, the first one in on the driver's side, and then get to go right in front of it, and that's number 6 in the tightening sequence. Okay, now we're going to move here over to the passenger side of the car and get the last 2. Number 7's the farthest one back on the passenger side, and number 8's going to be the one in front. And when we go back around here in a second, I pardon my heater running, but I'll let you hear the clicking of the torque wrench, which you can hear even over the heater. Alright, that concludes the manifold, the torquing the bolts and putting it in. Now it's just putting vacuum hoses and such back in place, and we're going to start with this one that goes from the EGR valve to the transducer and gets the main vacuum off the back of the intake plenum. But first here, and try to get it in that you can see it, and we'll just plug it in. It's a dual hose vacuum hose connector. We'll just plug it into the transducer. It only goes on one way, and give it a push, and back on it is. And now while we're right here, we're going to take and plug the wire back into the transducer also, which is right there, and it only plugs in one way, and the clip, the release goes towards the top. Alrighty, and now we're going to hook the main vacuum up right there at the bottom of the manifold. That one on my cart, it had the wire tie on it, but it seems to be selling good. And now we're going to take and hook up our brake booster, the vacuum hose. Remember the trick earlier on this, you don't have to unhook it on the bottom of the plenum. You can unhook it at the firewall of the car, which makes life easy. And grab our pliers here and slide this little clamp back into place, hopefully. And there it goes. These are something else. Sometimes they're no problem. Sometimes those little clamps will fight with you. And now this vacuum hose that goes straight up, that comes out of the metal pipe, get it worked around and back on. And if I could get it to just not twist it in, and that's on. Now I'll try to get in here and show you this breather tube pipe that goes up to the intake plenum, but starts down underneath the lower intake manifold. But luckily it just slides right in. Then it goes right here into this. Now on this car, you can see those two hose clamps. I didn't even show that. This was messed up on this car, which was sort of a problem, but I fixed it for my cousin's husband. But that probably was more a problem than those plugs and wires, but it was a good idea to do it all at the same time. And there, that's plugged in. Yeah, what I'm basically saying on these vacuum hoses, and that while you're doing them, check them, because a cracked vacuum hose will give you problem and drivability issues also. And now we're going to take here and hook up our breather tube, this one that goes up to the air cleaner, and take and work it around. You can see how it comes up behind the plenum. I added a new piece of vacuum hose on that also, if you took notice. Again, it's a good time to check all of them, and again, they can certainly mess with you. Alrighty, next order of business, give vacuum hoses a break here. We're going to plug our throttle position sensor back in, and only plugs in one way. And give you a close-up look at the plug-in itself, and get your fingers in there. This is probably about the tightest working conditions on this whole job. And push it in until it snaps, and there that is. Now we're going to plug in a right aware control valve. That's easy to get to, straight in, and that's plugged in. Alrighty, now it's time to put our EGR valve back on, which is fairly cut and dry. Top of it there is, of course, with the vacuum hose, and the bottom part of it goes on the studs, and the upper two are bolts, but that bottom part's on a flex pipe, gives you a little freedom of movement. I'm going to start the nuts on the flex pipe first before I worry about lining the top two bolts up. Yeah, I was surprised, at least on this old car. A lot of times this stuff around these EGRs, and that corroded up bad, and they're hard to get off, but these turned off easy, and they're turning on same way. Like I say, no problem whatsoever. And there they are, finger tight on. And then we're going to take here and we're going to tighten them up with the socket and ratchet a little bit tighter before we put the bolts in. Alrighty, I didn't show it, but you'll want to take when you do this on this EGR, just like the intake plenum. Make sure your gaskets are good yet and they're not tore. These were just fine on this. I didn't show it, but if they're not, you'll have to replace them. But they're not that expensive, an EGR gasket. But yeah, these were reusable. And now we're going to start our bolts in the top, get it lined up. That flex pipe, you see, you can move it a little bit right and left and up and down till you get where you need it to start the bolt. Yeah, just get this bolt turned in a couple threads and we'll get the other one started. And then, like I say, downhill stretch on this. I'm actually probably having a little trouble there getting it in, but There we go, and we'll get the other one started. On that, I wasn't that worried about exact torque, but on this EGR valve, if you read the book, the nuts are supposed to be tightened to only 89 inch-pounds, but the bolts that we're doing now are supposed to be tightened to 18 foot-pounds. Basically, snug the nuts up, make the bolts a little tighter, and it'll be fine. Like I say, this is one time. Yeah, like that intake. Yes, the torque is important. It's plastic, and it's could cause vacuum leaks. But yeah, I'm not, which in a sense so is the EGR valve, but I'm not, again, not concerned about it. But that is the torque specifications if you are worried about it. Anyhow, we're about ready to finish tightening this up. There we go. And we'll just go here once and tighten the other bolt at the top, and then we're going to go take and check the other one again once, and it should about soon be good enough on it, and it is installed. Now we are simply just going to plug the vacuum hose back into it. That's the easy step. And we're going to put these throttle cables back into place, starting with the bracket and bolts that hold it to the throttle body, and start them in finger tight. Again, earlier in the video, I found this easier to do than trying to unlatch those cables out of this metal bracket, but if you choose to do it the other way, that's your choice. As with anything, whether working on a car or something else, there's more than one way to accomplish a task. Yes, there's completely wrong ways, but either way on those cables is right, whatever works best for you. Okay, and we're just taking here just the extension and the sockets. Initially snug these up a little bit, and then we'll tighten them. And these turn into an aluminum housing, so you don't want to go too crazy on tightening them, or you'll strip that aluminum out. It don't take much. I know that from a fact over the years with bad experiences on that. And you see I'm just using a 1/4-inch drive ratchet also. Okay, I'm going to say those are just about tight enough, and now we're going to take here and hook our cables up. This is the one for the throttle. Sort of work it around, push it in that top hole, and it like sits down around the groove. There's a groove made for it that it rides in, and you got to sort of like pull back on the throttle body while you work the cable into place. Takes a little bit of maneuvering, but there I do believe I have it. And then just simply that other one, you just take and put it back on by pulling it a little bit forward, and it just slides back over that little tab that's built into the throttle. Which, all in all, that concludes the hooking this up, with the exception of the throttle return spring. And we're going to take and put that spring back into place. And there's the spring. And hook one end on the throttle, the lever, and the other one goes back on the bracket. Once I find the hole, it actually hooks up fairly easy. And there, that's hooked up. And I'm going to here demonstrate there for you. It does work. Get in the car, make sure it is hooked up right and moves freely. And you can see it moves back and forth, returns itself with no problem. Yeah, if something was binding or something on it, you'd fill it there with no issue. And now we're just going to take, this is one of the about the easiest things also, is put this little cover over the cables and just push those little push tabs back down in the two holes in the bracket that I'm pointing to, and just line those up and push one in and push the other in. And that concludes that. Now we're going to take and put our air cleaner, the top of it, back on, and just an overview of it. And those two like metal plastic tabs like stick down in the lower part of the air cleaner housing. They slide in once you get the wires and the cables and all that good stuff out of your way. And just a little bit working here, it's being stubborn, but perhaps. There we got our duck back on the throttle body, and here we're still having a little bit of trouble getting it down in those brackets, but finally, now we can just take our little locking tabs, put them back on, and latch them into place. If you notice, when that's fitting good, the top of the air cleaner housing with the bottom, it's a good tight fit. You don't see any gap, and that's when you know you do have it in place exactly how it should be. Now I'm going to take and tighten the clamp up to the throttle body at that rubber duct before we proceed. And you do want to not forget to tighten these, because it will, on these modern cars, will mess them up and they'll run rough if you don't tighten them. And I tighten the other one. Even though I never disconnected it there, I wasn't sure when I was taking it apart. There's our mass airflow sensor plug in. Get that plugged back in. And we have that hose to plug in over in goes into the ductwork. And there's another one. Like I say, there's two that go in on that side of it. One of them goes straight in and the other one has a 90-degree angle, at least on this car. And we got to take, this goes from the valve cover, push it down on the valve cover and into the other side of this air duct. And that's all the hardware plumbing back into that. Now it's time to, again, I show the complete job. We're putting the battery back in it. After we get our cables out of the way, put it down in there. Not really that bad of a one to put in. If you ever had a Chevy Astro or GMC Safari and tried to put the battery in, you got it like tilted on the side and wiggle and jiggle and it gets stuck. But yeah, this isn't real bad. And there it's set down in. And the cover, again, I was surprised this was still on this car, because I think usually about the first time somebody changes the battery in a car, you never hardly get them. They end up going and are hold down. And that little tab sits up towards the front of the car because it goes down against the battery. That's what holds the battery in place. That's the objective, at least. I don't know really in a serious wreck how effective that's going to keep it in place, but that's their story. And they're sticking to it. Then anyhow, we'll tighten this up here. Just hold down little quarter. I'm just going to use a little 1/4-inch drive ratchet. I say this was lucky this turned out, because a lot of times these do break off, corrosion from the battery and such. And they're such of a fine little bolt, but it did come, so we'll put it back into place. And again, try not to break it off since I didn't the first time. It's not turning in the easiest, and I even sprayed it up with some stuff, but I think we're going to get it, and it'll be the problem for whoever pulls the battery out of the car the next time around to hope it comes. And it's in. Alrighty, now we're going to hook the positive battery cable back up and get our little socket here and tighten the terminal up so we don't forget that, and then wonder why down the road you go to get in and start it and it just goes click because you have a bad terminal connection. And put our negative back on and tighten that up, and like I say, and it's tight to go. And here we are ready to give this a shot, I do believe. Now ready, a drum roll here, and we're going to fire this up. We're getting in it right now as we speak.